In some medieval homes, families shared the same bed with children, servants, and sometimes even animals. Sleep was warmer, but far more crowded. If you are listening at night, tell me where you are and what time it is. Welcome to Dreamy Old Stories, where we share slow and gentle stories from history. These stories are made to calm your mind and help you fall asleep. As the story continues, the pace stays slow and calm. There is no hurry, only the quiet passing of time. You can listen closely, or let the sound fade as the night moves gently forward. As the day slowly passed through its quiet hours, the medieval home continued its steady rhythm. The morning work had begun long ago, and now the village moved through the middle part of the day when the sun stood higher in the sky. Inside the house, the room felt different from the peaceful stillness of the night. Sunlight reached through the small windows more strongly now. Thin beams of light crossed the packed earth floor and touched the wooden walls. The fire in the hearth burned gently when needed, though during warmer days it was allowed to rest between cooking. The bedding from the night remained set aside. Straw mattresses leaned quietly against the wall, their cloth covers slightly uneven from the pressure of sleeping bodies hours earlier. Wool blankets rested folded across benches or wooden rails where fresh air could reach them. These objects waited patiently. They would return to their purpose only after the sun had set again and the quiet of evening settled across the village. Until then, they remained silent parts of the household. During the daylight hours, the house belonged to work and daily life. People moved through the room with steady purpose. Clay bowls were lifted and placed back again. A wooden spoon stirred slowly inside a pot above the fire. The small sounds of daily activity filled the space where quiet breathing had rested during the night. Children sometimes passed through the house during the day. They entered and left quickly, carrying small objects or speaking briefly before running outside again. Their footsteps crossed the same floor where they had slept only hours before. The house was not large enough to separate every activity. Sleep, cooking, conversation, and work all shared the same space. This closeness shaped how medieval families experienced their homes. Nothing felt distant. The bed where someone rested at night might sit only a few steps from the hearth where food was cooked during the day. A blanket folded along the wall might later cover someone sleeping only a short distance from the door. Everything belonged to the same room. Because of this, the house often held quiet reminders of the night's rest even during the busiest hours of the day. A faint scent of straw might remain in the air. A pillow of folded cloth might still carry the slight warmth of the body that rested there earlier. These small traces slowly faded as the hours passed. The straw used in mattresses played an important role in medieval sleep. Straw was easy to gather and simple to replace. Farmers often had access to fresh straw after the harvest seasons, and it provided a firm surface that supported the body through the night. When packed inside a cloth sack, straw created a mattress that was both practical and familiar. Over time, the straw slowly flattened beneath repeated use. When this happened, the mattress could feel uneven or thin. Families solved this problem by opening the cloth sack and adding fresh straw. This small task helped restore the mattress. Sometimes the entire filling was replaced, especially when the straw became too soft or worn. The old straw was often used for other purposes, such as bedding for animals or simple floor covering. Nothing in the medieval household was wasted easily. Feather mattresses were different. These softer beds were filled with feathers gathered from geese or other birds. They were lighter and more comfortable than straw mattresses, but they were also more expensive and less common among poorer families. Feather beds often belonged to wealthier households. Even so, many medieval people slept perfectly well on straw mattresses. Comfort came not only from softness but from warmth, habit, and the quiet rhythm of rest after a long day of work. As the sun moved slowly across the sky, the room inside the house changed again. The bright light of midday eventually softened. Shadows began to stretch along the walls as afternoon approached. The air inside the house carried the calm feeling of a place that had already passed through many hours of activity. Outside, the village continued its steady life. Farmers worked in fields beyond the houses. Merchants traveled along narrow roads with small carts. Craftsmen shaped wood, leather, or metal inside their workshops. All of them would eventually return home, and when they did, the same quiet house that had sheltered them during the night would again welcome them through the evening hours. The bedding waiting along the wall would soon return to the floor. The blankets would be unfolded once more. The fire would glow softly in the hearth as darkness gathered outside the door. For now, however, the house remained a place of daylight. Voices moved through the room. Tools rested near the wall. Sunlight drifted slowly across the floor. Yet quietly, without drawing attention, the objects of sleep remained nearby, waiting patiently for the calm return of night that would once again bring rest to the medieval home. As the afternoon moved quietly through the village, the medieval home continued to hold the gentle rhythm of daily life. The brighter hours of midday had passed, and the sunlight now entered the room at a softer angle. The beams of light stretched longer across the floor. Dust moved slowly through the warm air near the hearth. The room carried the calm feeling of a place that had already seen many small tasks completed during the day. Along the wall, the bedding still waited. Straw mattresses leaned quietly where they had been placed earlier in the morning. Their cloth coverings showed faint creases and soft impressions left by the sleepers of the previous night. Wool blankets rested folded nearby. The texture of the wool was thick and slightly rough to the touch, but it held warmth better than many other materials. For medieval families, these blankets were important possessions. Some blankets had been used for many years. Small repairs often appeared where worn threads had been carefully sewn together again. A patch of cloth might cover a thin place in the fabric. These repairs were done patiently, often during quiet moments in the afternoon or evening. Nothing in the house was easily replaced. Every object served its purpose for as long as possible. This careful use of materials also shaped the way bedding was treated. Blankets were aired when the weather allowed. Straw mattresses were refreshed with new filling when the old straw had flattened. Pillows made from cloth sacks were opened and adjusted when needed. These small acts kept the sleeping space comfortable. While the bedding rested quietly through the afternoon, the room slowly filled with softer sounds as the day moved forward. The louder work of the morning had already passed. Now the house carried a quieter energy. Someone might sit near the doorway repairing a piece of clothing. Another person might smooth a wooden tool handle with slow and careful movements. These quiet tasks allowed the body to rest slightly before the evening work returned. Children sometimes played outside during these hours. Their distant voices drifted through the open doorway or window. Laughter rose and faded again as they ran along the narrow paths between houses. Inside the room, the air remained calm. The hearth held only a small fire during the warmer parts of the afternoon. The flames were kept low unless cooking was needed. A few pieces of wood rested nearby, ready for when evening would require more warmth. As the sun slowly began its descent toward the horizon, the character of the house began to shift once again. The light entering the room grew warmer and softer. Long shadows stretched along the walls and across the floor. The quiet tasks of the afternoon gradually came to an end. People who had been working outside would soon return. Farmers walked back from the fields carrying tools across their shoulders. Craftsmen closed the doors of their small workshops. Carts rolled slowly along the village paths as the final tasks of the day were completed. Inside the house, someone often turned attention back to the hearth. The small afternoon fire was gently stirred. A few larger pieces of wood were placed carefully among the glowing coals. The flames slowly rose again, bringing a deeper warmth to the room. This growing fire signaled the approach of evening. With its return came the quiet preparation for the night's rest. The bedding along the wall would soon be moved again. Blankets would unfold and spread across the mattresses. The room would begin its transformation from a place of work back into a place of sleep. Yet this change always happened slowly. Medieval evenings were not rushed. Without bright lights to extend the day far into the night, people allowed the natural fading of sunlight to guide their actions. As darkness approached, the house gradually became calmer. Voices lowered, movements slowed. The fire became the brightest source of light inside the room. The bedding that had waited patiently through the day would soon return to the center of the home. Straw mattresses would be placed once more upon the floor or wooden bed frames. Wool blankets would spread across them, ready to hold warmth through the night. And the quiet room that had held the sounds of daily life would soon return again to the gentle rhythm of sleep beneath the wooden roof of the medieval home. As the afternoon slowly gave way to evening, the house began to settle into a quieter rhythm once more. The last small tasks of the day came to an end, and the warm light of the lowering sun reached softly through the windows. Inside the room, the fire in the hearth burned a little stronger now. The added wood caught the flame and spread a gentle glow across the walls. Shadows moved slowly along the wooden beams above, just as they had on so many evenings before. Along the wall, the bedding waited. Soon the straw mattresses would be placed back upon the floor, and the wool blankets would unfold again. The room would slowly return to the peaceful arrangement that welcomed sleep each night. For now the house rested in the calm space between day and night. The quiet warmth of the hearth filled the room, and outside the village slowly prepared for another evening of darkness and rest. Evening in the medieval village often arrived quietly, almost gently, as if the day itself had grown tired. The bright light of the afternoon slowly faded, and the sky softened into deeper shades of gold and gray. Inside the home, the change could be felt long before the room became dark. The fire in the hearth burned more steadily now. A few thicker pieces of wood had been added so the warmth would last through the coming hours. The flames rose slowly and cast a calm orange light across the walls. The room began to feel different again. During the day, it had been a place of work and movement. Now the house slowly returned to its other purpose. The same space that had held tools, bowls, and quiet tasks began preparing itself for rest. The bedding along the wall would soon return to the center of the room. Straw mattresses were lifted one by one and placed carefully where the family would sleep. Some rested directly on the floor, while others were laid upon simple wooden frames. These bed frames were sturdy and plain. They were often made from thick pieces of wood joined together with pegs or simple joints. Their purpose was not decoration but strength. They lifted the mattress slightly above the cold floor and helped protect the bedding from dampness. Once the mattresses were placed, the blankets followed. Wool blankets unfolded slowly across the bedding. Their heavy texture carried warmth that would soon surround the sleepers through the night. Some blankets were layered one on top of another when colder weather arrived. Pillows made from cloth sacks were placed near the head of the bed. These pillows were filled with soft materials such as straw, wool scraps, or feathers. They were simple and firm, but after a long day of work they were enough. The room now began to resemble the quiet sleeping space it had been the night before. Children often prepared for sleep first. After the long hours of daylight play and movement, their energy faded quickly once evening arrived. A child might sit quietly near the hearth for a few moments, watching the slow movement of the flames. The warmth of the fire often made their eyes grow heavy. Sometimes they lay down while the room was still softly lit by the fire. Their breathing slowed as sleep arrived naturally, long before the adults finished their evening conversations. Adults remained awake a little longer. They sat near the hearth, resting their tired bodies after the work of the day. Some spoke quietly about the events of the afternoon. Others simply watched the fire without speaking. The firelight moved gently across their faces. This quiet time beside the hearth was an important part of the evening. It allowed the body to relax before sleep arrived. The warmth of the fire eased tired muscles and created a calm atmosphere inside the home. Outside the village, the sky continued to darken. The last light of the sun disappeared behind distant hills or trees. The first stars slowly appeared above the rooftops. A cool breeze sometimes moved along the narrow paths between houses. Inside the home, the door was often closed to keep the warmth inside. The fire remained the main source of light now. Its glow filled the room with soft, moving shadows. The wooden beams above reflected the warm color of the flames. Animals sometimes settled nearby as well. A cat might curl beside the hearth where the floor remained warm. A dog often rested near the doorway, listening quietly for any unusual sounds outside. Their calm presence added to the peaceful feeling of the room. The medieval home did not contain many separate spaces. Most of the family gathered within this single room during the evening hours. This closeness created a quiet sense of shared comfort. Everyone rested within sight of the hearth. As the evening continued, the voices in the room gradually softened. Conversations grew shorter and slower. The tiredness from the day's work slowly returned to the body. Eventually, the moment came when someone rose to prepare the fire for the night. A final piece of wood might be added, or the coals arranged so they would continue glowing quietly until morning. These small adjustments helped preserve warmth through the long hours of darkness. The house had now fully returned to its nighttime arrangement. The bedding waited quietly. The fire moved with slow light. The village outside had grown still. Soon the last person would lie down beneath the blankets. And once again the medieval home would settle into the gentle rhythm of sleep that had repeated itself night after night for generations. As the evening settled fully over the village, the small house grew quieter with each passing moment. The final sounds of the day faded into the background. Tools had already been placed along the wall. The doorway was closed against the cool air of the night. Inside the room, the fire in the hearth had become the center of attention. Its warm light moved slowly across the floor and walls, filling the space with a calm glow. The flames rose and fell gently, making soft sounds as the wood shifted and burned. Around the room, the bedding was already prepared. Straw mattresses rested where they had been placed earlier. Wool blankets lay open across them, waiting for the sleepers who would soon settle beneath their warmth. The room felt peaceful now. Children who had grown tired during the evening often slept first. Some had already drifted into sleep while the adults still sat beside the fire. Their small shapes rested quietly beneath the blankets, breathing slowly. The adults remained awake a little longer. They spoke in low voices or simply sat together in comfortable silence. After a long day of work in fields, workshops, or kitchens, this quiet time near the fire offered a moment of rest before sleep. The warmth of the hearth reached their tired hands and faces. It was a familiar comfort that had been part of their evenings for many years. The gentle light of the fire created a calm atmosphere that slowly encouraged the body to relax. Outside the house, the village had become still. The narrow paths between homes were empty now. Most doors had been closed as families prepared for their own nights of rest. Only the faint glow of hearth fires could be seen through a few small windows. Above the rooftops, the sky had grown dark and wide. Stars spread across the night sky in numbers that felt almost endless. Without the glow of distant cities, the stars shone clearly over the quiet countryside. Inside the house, however, few people watched the sky for long. The warmth of the fire and the comfort of the bedding called them toward sleep. Slowly, the remaining voices in the room faded into silence. One by one, the adults rose from their places near the hearth. They stepped carefully across the floor so they would not disturb those already sleeping. Blankets were lifted gently and pulled close around their shoulders as they lay down. The straw mattresses shifted softly beneath the weight. These simple beds held the familiar shape of many nights. Though not soft in the way modern beds might be, they offered steady support after a long day of physical work. Once everyone had settled into their places, the room grew very quiet. Only the small sounds of the fire remained. A piece of wood cracked softly inside the hearth. The glowing coals shifted beneath the ash. These sounds blended with the slow breathing of the sleepers. Animals resting inside the house joined the quiet rhythm as well. A cat curled tightly near the hearth might lift its head for a moment before returning to sleep. A dog lying near the door stretched slightly before settling again. Their presence added to the calm feeling of the room. The firelight grew softer as the flames slowly lowered. Shadows moved gently across the walls and beams above the sleepers. The house felt peaceful and safe beneath its wooden roof. Many medieval homes followed this same quiet pattern each night. The bedding returned to the floor. The fire burned low but steady. The family gathered close together in the same room where they had lived and worked throughout the day. This closeness created a sense of shared warmth. The cold night air might move outside along the village roads, but inside the home the blankets and the hearth protected the sleepers from the chill. Gradually, even the fire began to calm. The flames lowered until only glowing coals remained. Their faint red light spread softly across the floor, just enough to reveal the quiet shapes of the sleeping room. The night had now fully arrived. The house held its calm silence. The village outside rested beneath the dark sky. The steady breathing of the sleepers filled the room with a gentle rhythm. And slowly, beneath the quiet glow of the hearth, the medieval home drifted deeper into another peaceful night of sleep. As the night deepened, the room settled into a steady silence. The last movement of the evening had passed, and now the house rested beneath the quiet glow of the hearth. The fire had lowered again. Only a few soft embers remained beneath the ash, spreading a faint warmth through the room. Their dim light touched the edges of the wooden floor and the legs of the simple beds. The sleepers lay quietly beneath their blankets. The wool coverings held the warmth gathered earlier in the evening. Straw mattresses supported their bodies as they rested after the long hours of the day. Breathing moved slowly through the room. The calm rhythm of sleep filled the house, rising and falling like a gentle tide. No one hurried through these hours. The night belonged entirely to rest. Outside, the village remained still. The narrow paths were empty, and the fields beyond the houses rested beneath the wide sky. Only the quiet movement of wind across distant trees disturbed the darkness. Inside the medieval home, the warmth of the hearth and the comfort of the blankets continued to protect the sleepers. And through the quiet hours before morning, the house remained peaceful, holding the family safely within the slow and steady rhythm of sleep. The night inside a medieval home often carried a calm that felt deep and unbroken. Once everyone had settled into sleep, the room became a quiet world of soft breathing, warm blankets, and the faint glow of the hearth. Hours passed slowly in this peaceful darkness. The fire that had once burned brightly during the evening had now settled into glowing embers. Beneath a layer of ash, the coals continued their slow work, giving just enough warmth to soften the chill of the night. Their light was dim but steady. It stretched gently across the floor and touched the wooden beams above with a faint red color. Sometimes the glow brightened for a moment when a small piece of coal shifted beneath the ash. For the sleeping household, these changes were barely noticed. Their rest had grown deeper as the night moved forward. The long hours of work during the day had left their bodies ready for sleep. Muscles that had carried tools or walked across fields now rested beneath the heavy wool blankets. The house held them quietly. Each sleeper lay close to the others, their beds arranged within the same small room. This closeness had practical reasons, especially during colder months when shared warmth helped protect against the cool air. But it also created a sense of quiet companionship. Even while sleeping, people could hear the gentle breathing of others nearby. These small sounds were comforting in the darkness. They reminded the sleepers that they were not alone in the quiet house. The blankets played an important role during these hours. Thick wool coverings trapped warmth around the body. The weight of the fabric created a steady comfort that helped the sleepers remain warm even when the air outside grew colder. Sometimes a blanket shifted as someone turned slowly in their sleep. A straw mattress might rustle softly beneath the movement. Then the room would return to stillness again. Outside the house, the medieval night stretched across the village. The narrow dirt paths between homes were empty. Doors remained closed. Only the faint glow of hearth fires could be seen through a few windows. Beyond the village, the countryside rested beneath the dark sky. Fields lay quiet under the stars. Trees moved gently when the wind passed through their branches. The sounds of animals in distant barns were soft and occasional. Yet inside the house, the night felt sheltered. The wooden walls protected the sleepers from the wind. The roof held back the cool air drifting across the village. The hearth remained the quiet center of warmth within the room. Even when the fire grew low, the heat stored within the walls and bedding helped keep the space comfortable. Some sleepers stirred briefly during these hours. A person might adjust their pillow or pull the blanket slightly higher across their shoulders. These movements were small and slow, often happening without fully waking. Sleep returned easily. The body followed the rhythm of the night in its own quiet way. Rest came naturally after the long daylight hours of work and movement. Children often slept deeply during this time. Their small forms remained still beneath the blankets, their breathing soft and regular. The warmth of the room and the presence of family nearby allowed them to rest without worry. Adults slept nearby in similar calm. The room carried the gentle sound of many people breathing at once. It was not loud, but it filled the space with a steady rhythm that blended with the quiet crackle of the dying fire. Animals sometimes shared the room as well. A cat curled beside the hearth might shift slightly, its tail moving across the floor before settling again. A dog resting near the doorway occasionally lifted its head before returning to sleep. These small creatures were part of the household's nighttime calm. The medieval home held all of these quiet lives beneath the same roof. The walls, beams, blankets, and bedding had supported this rhythm for many years. Each night repeated the same gentle pattern. Even as time passed through the darkness, the house remained peaceful. The embers in the hearth slowly dimmed. The air cooled slightly. The sleepers rested beneath their blankets without disturbance. And while the night continued its quiet journey toward morning, the medieval home remained wrapped in calm, steady sleep beneath the wide and silent sky. As the night continued its slow passage, the house remained wrapped in deep quiet. The sleeping room held a stillness that had settled gradually after the final movements of the evening. The fire in the hearth had almost disappeared now. Only a few dim coals rested beneath the pale ash. Their faint warmth drifted slowly into the air closest to the hearth, spreading gently across the floor before fading into the cooler parts of the room. The light from the embers was very soft. It touched only the nearest shapes, leaving the corners of the house in deeper shadow. The outlines of beds and blankets could barely be seen in the low glow. Yet the sleepers beneath those blankets remained peaceful. The weight of wool held warmth close to their bodies. Straw mattresses supported them quietly, their dry filling shifting only slightly when someone turned during the night. Most of the household slept deeply now. The hours had moved far beyond the first part of the night. For many people, this was the time when the body rested most completely. The work of the day had been left behind, and the quiet of the house allowed the mind to settle. Breathing filled the room with a steady rhythm. It rose and fell softly in the darkness. Sometimes one sleeper would turn or sigh before becoming still again. These small sounds blended naturally with the quiet crackle of the last glowing coals. The house itself remained calm. Wooden beams held the roof above the sleeping family. Over the years, smoke from countless fires had darkened the wood, leaving a deep color that carried the quiet memory of many evenings. Sometimes the wood shifted slightly as the night air cooled. A faint creak might travel through the beams or along the walls. These sounds were gentle and familiar to those who lived in the house. Outside, the village remained silent. The narrow roads between the homes were empty. The doors of the houses stayed closed against the cool night air. Only the faint shapes of rooftops could be seen beneath the starlight. The sky above the village stretched wide and dark. Stars filled the open space with a steady brightness. The moon sometimes moved slowly above the fields, casting a pale light across the quiet land. Inside the house, however, the sleepers rarely noticed the sky. Their rest was deep and steady beneath the blankets. The warmth of the bedding and the calm of the room allowed sleep to continue without disturbance. Occasionally someone stirred for a moment. A blanket might shift across a shoulder. A hand might move slowly across the pillow before becoming still again. The body often adjusted itself during sleep without fully waking. Soon the quiet returned once more. Animals resting inside the house shared the same peaceful rhythm. A cat curled near the hearth sometimes stretched gently before tucking its paws beneath its body again. A dog lying close to the doorway might lift its head for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of the night before lowering it back to the floor. These animals helped guard the house in their quiet way. Their presence added to the sense of calm security inside the home. The family slept knowing that the familiar shapes of their animals rested nearby. The medieval house was not large, but it provided shelter and warmth. The walls held back the cool wind moving across the village. The roof protected the sleepers from rain or drifting mist. Inside, the bedding gathered the warmth of many bodies beneath thick blankets. Together, these simple things created a place where rest could happen. The night moved slowly through these hours. Without clocks marking the time, the passing of the night could only be felt through small changes. The air cooled slightly. The glow of the embers dimmed further. Gradually, the deepest part of the night began to pass. But for now, the room remained wrapped in its quiet center. The sleepers continued their calm rest beneath the blankets, and the medieval home held them gently through the peaceful darkness that stretched between the end of evening and the quiet arrival of morning. As the night slowly moved toward its final hours, the quiet inside the house remained deep and steady. The embers in the hearth had grown faint now, their soft glow barely visible beneath the pale layer of ash. The warmth in the room rested mostly within the blankets. Wool coverings held the heat gathered earlier in the evening, wrapping the sleepers in a gentle comfort. The straw mattresses beneath them remained firm and quiet, supporting their bodies through the last part of the night. The house itself seemed almost completely still. The wooden beams above held the silent roof. The walls protected the room from the cool air outside. Every part of the home rested together in calm silence. Soon the night would begin to change. Somewhere beyond the dark horizon, the first faint signs of morning were already beginning to form. But inside the medieval house, the sleepers remained unaware, resting peacefully through the final moments before dawn. The quiet hours before dawn often held a special stillness inside a medieval home. By this point, the deepest part of the night had already passed, yet morning had not fully arrived. The room remained dark and calm. The embers in the hearth had nearly faded. Beneath the soft gray ash, only a few small points of red light remained. Their warmth was faint but steady, drifting slowly across the floor closest to the fire. Beyond that small circle of warmth, the air had grown cooler. Blankets now held most of the heat gathered during the night. The thick wool coverings wrapped closely around the sleepers, protecting them from the cool air that slowly moved through the house. The family remained deeply asleep. Their breathing rose and fell gently beneath the blankets. The straw mattresses supported them quietly, making only the softest rustle when someone shifted during sleep. These final hours of the night were often the most peaceful. The sounds of the evening had long disappeared. Even the occasional creak of the house had become rare as the air settled into the stillness before morning. Outside, the village lay silent beneath the dark sky. The narrow dirt paths between homes were empty. Wooden doors remained closed, and most windows showed no light. Only the faint glow of dying hearth fires could be seen in a few distant houses. Beyond the village, fields stretched quietly across the countryside. A light mist sometimes gathered near the ground during these hours. The cool air carried the smell of damp earth and distant grass. Trees stood still along the edges of the fields, their branches barely moving in the calm night. Inside the house, the sleepers remained wrapped in warmth. A blanket might move slightly as someone turned to a more comfortable position. A pillow made from cloth and straw might shift beneath a resting head. Then the room returned to stillness again. Children often slept especially deeply during these hours. After the long activity of the day, their bodies rested fully beneath the blankets. Their small shapes lay quietly beside parents or older siblings. Adults rested nearby in similar calm. The steady rhythm of breathing filled the room with a soft, shared sound. It blended gently with the faint crackle of the last glowing coals in the hearth. Animals resting in the house sometimes stirred briefly, A cat curled near the hearth might stretch its paws before settling again beside the warmth of the embers. A dog near the doorway might lift its head for a moment, listening quietly to the distant night. Soon it lowered its head again and returned to sleep. These animals were part of the quiet life of the home. They shared the same space, the same warmth, and the same peaceful darkness. The medieval house itself had grown cool in these final hours before morning. The wooden beams above slowly adjusted to the changing temperature. Now and then a faint creak moved through the structure as the air cooled further. But these sounds were gentle and familiar. People who lived in such houses were used to these quiet movements of the building. They had heard them during many nights before. Beyond the walls, the sky had begun its slow transformation. The stars still shone brightly, but somewhere far away the horizon had begun to soften. The coming of morning had started its quiet approach. Inside the room, however, the sleepers remained unaware. The blankets held them warmly. The straw mattresses supported their rest. The faint glow of the embers continued its quiet watch in the hearth. The house held a peaceful silence. These were the final moments of deep sleep before the village would slowly begin to wake. Soon the first sounds of morning would return. But for now the medieval home remained calm and still, resting gently within the quiet darkness that lingered just before the arrival of dawn. The quiet before dawn continued to hold the house in a calm stillness. These were the final peaceful moments of the night, when the world remained suspended between darkness and the slow return of morning. Inside the room, the sleepers still rested beneath their blankets. The wool coverings held the warmth gathered during the night. Straw mattresses supported their bodies with steady firmness, and the quiet breathing of the household filled the space with a gentle rhythm. The hearth in the center of the room had almost finished its work. Only a few dim embers remained beneath the ash. Their faint glow was barely visible now, yet the warmth they had given earlier still lingered within the blankets and the walls of the house. The air felt cooler than it had earlier in the night. This was common in the hours before dawn. As the fire faded and the outside air cooled, the house gradually lost some of its warmth. Yet the sleepers rarely noticed. The blankets protected them, thick wool wrapped closely around their shoulders and legs. The weight of the fabric created a quiet sense of comfort that helped keep the body warm even when the room itself had cooled. Occasionally someone moved during sleep. A blanket shifted softly. A pillow rustled slightly beneath a turning head. These movements were small and brief, and the calm stillness of the room quickly returned. Children often slept deeply through these hours. Their small forms remained still beneath the blankets. The steady breathing of sleep rose and fell slowly, undisturbed by the quiet changes of the night. Adults slept nearby in the same peaceful rhythm. The closeness of the sleeping spaces meant that everyone shared the same warmth and quiet companionship through the night. In a medieval home, families rarely slept far apart. The room itself seemed to hold their rest. Wooden beams crossed the ceiling above them. The walls, made from timber and clay, protected the sleepers from the cool air outside. The door remained closed against the silent village streets. Beyond the house, the countryside remained wrapped in darkness. Fields stretched across the land under the fading stars. Trees stood quietly along narrow paths. Occasionally, a faint breeze moved through their branches. But inside the home, the night remained calm. Animals resting nearby sometimes stirred during these final hours. A cat curled beside the hearth might open its eyes briefly before settling again beside the warmth of the fading embers. A dog resting near the doorway might shift its paws quietly across the floor. These small movements were part of the house's nighttime life. They blended gently with the soft breathing of the sleepers. Slowly, the sky outside began its gradual change. The stars were still visible, yet their brightness had begun to soften. The darkness of the sky was no longer as deep as it had been earlier in the night. Morning was beginning its quiet approach. Inside the house, however, the sleepers remained unaware of this change. Their rest continued peacefully beneath the blankets. The room held a calm silence. No voices spoke. No tools moved across the floor. Only the quiet rhythm of sleep filled the air. Soon the first signs of morning would appear. A rooster somewhere in the village would call out across the quiet fields. The first pale light would slip through the windows. The embers in the hearth would be stirred back into flame. But for now, the medieval home remained resting in the final calm moments of the night. The blankets stayed warm. The sleepers remained still. The quiet darkness lingered gently within the wooden walls. And the peaceful rhythm of sleep continued, holding the house in its last quiet minutes before the arrival of morning. At the edge of morning, the quiet inside the house remained soft and undisturbed. The sky beyond the village had begun to pale slightly, though the change was so gentle that no one inside the room noticed it yet. The sleepers continued resting beneath their blankets. The warmth of the wool coverings still surrounded them, holding the comfort of the night close to their bodies. The straw mattresses beneath them remained firm and quiet. The embers in the hearth were almost gone now. Their glow had faded to only a faint memory beneath the ash. Soon the fire would need to be stirred again when someone woke to begin the morning tasks. For the moment, however, the room stayed calm. The house rested in the final quiet minutes between night and day, holding the family peacefully in the last gentle stretch of sleep before the village slowly began to wake. Morning returned slowly to the medieval village, just as it had on countless days before. The darkness that had held the land through the night began to soften, and the sky above the rooftops slowly shifted from deep gray to pale light. Inside the house, the room remained quiet for a little while longer. The sleepers still rested beneath their blankets. Their breathing moved gently through the calm air of the room. The warmth of the wool coverings held the last comfort of the night around them. The hearth in the center of the room had almost gone cold. Only a faint memory of warmth remained beneath the ash where the fire had burned during the evening. Soon someone would rise to bring the fire back to life again, but for now the room remained still. The small windows allowed the first soft light of morning to enter. It moved quietly across the wooden walls and the packed earth floor. Shapes that had been hidden in darkness during the night slowly became visible again. The straw mattresses rested where the family had slept. Blankets covered the sleepers in gentle folds. Pillows made from cloth and straw supported their heads. Everything remained calm and undisturbed for a few peaceful moments more. Outside the village, the first sounds of morning began to appear. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster called out across the quiet fields. The sound traveled easily through the cool air before fading again. Soon another answered from farther away. These simple calls often marked the beginning of the village morning. They signaled that the night had ended and that the work of the new day would soon begin. Inside the house, one sleeper stirred slightly. A hand moved across the blanket. Someone turned gently on the mattress. These small movements were the first signs that sleep was slowly coming to an end. The cool air of the early morning touched the edges of the blankets. The warmth that had gathered through the night remained beneath the wool, but the room itself had cooled as the fire faded. This coolness often encouraged the first person to wake. Slowly a parent sat up. The blanket was pushed aside carefully so that the others would not be disturbed too quickly. The straw mattress shifted softly as the weight lifted from it. Bare feet touched the cool floor once again. The room still carried the calm feeling of the night that had just passed. For a moment, the waking person simply looked across the quiet space. The shapes of the sleeping family were still visible beneath their blankets. The hearth rested silently in the center of the room. A few gray pieces of ash remained where the fire had once burned. Soon the fire would return. The ashes would be moved aside to search for any surviving embers. If the coals had lasted through the night, they could be gently stirred back into flame with only a small piece of dry wood. This simple task began many mornings in medieval homes. But before the fire was rebuilt, the quiet of the early morning remained for a few moments longer. The rest of the household still slept. Children lay curled beneath their blankets. Another adult rested nearby, breathing slowly and peacefully. The room felt calm and protected beneath the wooden roof. Outside, the sky had grown brighter. The mist that sometimes rested over the fields began to lift slowly. Light spread gently across the ground and along the narrow paths between houses. Soon footsteps would appear along those paths. Farmers would walk toward their fields. Craftsmen would open the doors of their workshops. The quiet village would slowly fill with movement again. Inside the house, the final moments of sleep continued. The blankets still held their warmth. The straw mattresses still supported the resting bodies. The room carried the peaceful feeling that comes just before the day begins. These quiet mornings had followed the same pattern for generations. Night brought rest. Morning brought gentle waking. And the house moved slowly from sleep back into the life of the day. Soon the fire would be lit again. The bedding would be folded and placed along the wall. The room would become a place of work, conversation, and daily activity once more. But for now, in these soft moments of early light, the medieval home still rested quietly, holding the last peaceful breaths of sleep before the new day truly began. The early morning light slowly filled the room as the house moved gently out of sleep. What had been a quiet space of breathing and blankets through the night now began its quiet return to daytime life. The first person who had awakened stepped carefully across the floor. The cool earth beneath their feet reminded them that the fire had faded during the night. They moved toward the hearth and knelt beside the ashes that covered the small bed of coals beneath. With slow hands, the ashes were brushed aside. Sometimes the embers had completely faded, leaving only gray powder where the fire once lived. But often a faint red glow could still be found hiding deep inside the ash. When this happened, the morning fire could begin easily. A small piece of dry wood was placed beside the ember. Then another. A few careful breaths brought the faint glow back to life. A tiny spark appeared first. Thin smoke curled upward through the cool morning air. Slowly, a small flame returned, rising quietly from the wood as it began to burn. The hearth was alive again. Warm light spread gently across the floor and the lower part of the walls. The quiet glow began to replace the pale gray light that had entered through the windows. Behind the waking figure, the rest of the household slowly began to stir. A child shifted beneath the blanket. Another sleeper rolled gently onto one side. The sound of the fire returning to life often helped bring the others back from sleep. Blankets moved softly across the bedding. Someone stretched an arm slowly after the long night of rest. Another rubbed their eyes before sitting upright on the straw mattress. The room was still calm. Voices had not yet begun to fill the space. For a few moments, the family remained between sleep and wakefulness. adjusting slowly to the return of the day. The warmth of the fire began to spread through the room once again. Hands moved closer to the flames. Faces leaned toward the light. The cool air of the morning slowly faded as the hearth reclaimed its place at the center of the home. Soon the bedding began to change. Blankets were folded carefully and placed aside. Straw mattresses were lifted and leaned against the wall where fresh air could reach them during the day. The sleeping space slowly disappeared. The same room that had held quiet rest through the night returned to its daily purpose. The house shifted naturally from one role to another. Children often rose slowly during these moments. Their small footsteps crossed the floor as they moved toward the warmth of the hearth. Some remained wrapped in blankets for a few minutes longer while they watched the fire grow stronger. Outside, the village had begun to wake. Roosters called again across the fields. A distant door creaked open somewhere along the narrow path between houses. The first quiet voices of neighbors drifted through the morning air. Inside the house, the fire now burned steadily. Its light touched the wooden beams above. Smoke rose slowly toward the roof where it found its way outside through small openings. The smell of wood smoke returned to the room. It was a scent deeply connected to the life of the medieval home. The same smell had filled the air during the evening before sleep and now returned again with the morning fire. Soon the first simple meal of the day would be prepared. A pot might be placed above the flames. Bread could be warmed near the hearth. The family would gather once more around the center of the room where they had slept only hours before. The house had completed its quiet journey through the night. From evening rest beside the fire, to the calm breathing of deep sleep, to the pale light of morning returning through the windows, the cycle had moved gently forward. Now the room belonged once again to the day. But the memory of the night's rest remained in small ways. The straw mattresses still held the faint shape of where someone had slept. The blankets carried the warmth of the bodies they had covered. The quiet rhythm of sleep lingered softly in the room. And when evening returned again, the same bedding would spread across the floor once more. The fire would glow softly, the house would grow quiet, and the medieval home would welcome another calm night of rest beneath its wooden roof. As the morning continued to grow brighter, the house fully returned to its daytime life. The bedding that had carried the family through the night now rested quietly along the walls. Sunlight reached across the floor and touched the wooden beams above. The fire in the hearth burned steadily once again, bringing warmth and gentle light into the room. Smoke rose slowly toward the roof as it had on countless mornings before. The calm of the night had faded, yet its quiet comfort remained in the memory of the house. The straw mattresses still carried the faint scent of fields and dry grass. The wool blankets held the warmth gathered during the long hours of sleep. These simple things had protected the family through the darkness. Soon the house would fill with the sounds of the day. Footsteps would move across the floor. Voices would speak softly near the hearth. The work of the village would begin again outside the door. But the gentle rhythm of sleep would return once evening arrived. The bedding would come back to the floor. The fire would lower to a quiet glow. The house would settle once more beneath the calm darkness of night. And in that quiet darkness, just as it had for generations, the medieval home would again hold its sleepers in peaceful rest.